I'll start right away. Today we are just going to discuss about research design called ethnography, ethnographic research. Uh, just like the last week, let's also this week also let's reflect on this particular design, and by the end of the day, let us discuss on how this particular design is applicable in the context of your research. And before I begin, when we talk about designs, uh, the designs vary from field to field. In some fields, certain designs will be feasible. Say, for example, scientific designs in the field of applied sciences like physics and chemistry or life sciences. There are certain methods that will be very effective in those fields. Similarly, if you take language teaching, there are certain research methods that will exactly fit into that context of study. If you take literature, there will be certain designs that fit into the context of that particular study. So the term design itself is not a kind of an all encompassing terminology. It is quite domain specific. Having said that, knowing about particular research designs can help you to approach any particular area with a deeper perspective, because methods will help you to look at any particular area with a different lens, with a deeper lens, and perhaps a clear knowledge on all the methods will help the researcher to look at a particular problem with a multi-layered approach. So that is why, regardless of the field that you are in, whether literature or language teaching, the methods that we are discussing will definitely be applicable in some way or other. Having said that, let me start the session today on ethnography or ethnographic research. It's a qualitative design. As I said, I will give you the structure of my talk today. I'll start by defining what ethnographic research is, and then let me highlight on the characteristics and the features of ethnographic research, and then let me place my arguments in the context of your research, and ultimately let me show you some samples of it, and maybe let's have a discussion. Ultimately, that's the bottom line, a discussion from each one of you on how you think you can apply this particular design. So ultimately it all boils down to application and not just discussion, and that is where I am leading you to. Just like every session, we will focus more on the whys and the hows rather than what. So, what is ethnographic research? To place this particular topic in context. Am I audible and clear to all of you?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. You are clear.
To place this particular topic in context of ethnographic research, I would say that any research boils down to two aspects: to observe what others are doing and to pick the threads of discussion or the gaps from there. That is one paradigm. Another paradigm is through direct observation. So, whatever you learn or whatever you understand or whatever you perceive comes from direct observation, and that is called as ethnography. Ethnography refers to understanding the truth as it is, and that's based on your first hand observation, not on what somebody else said, not on what the literature says, not on what the key players in your field say, but it is based on your direct first hand observation of deciphering the truth, and that is called as ethnographic research. And this kind of research paradigm, a qualitative paradigm, stems from the field of anthropology, anthropological research. Every design is an offshoot of a particular field. So you will today you will know more about how ethnographic studies can be applied in your context. I mean, whether it can be applied or it can't be applied. If it can be applied, to what extent can it be applied? So these are the aspects that we are going to discuss today. So as I said, ethnographic research refers to observing the truth based on your first-hand observation. Just as the falling of an apple just gave the spark for Newton to discover the law of gravitation. In the same way, there may be certain important observations from your field that you would like to dig deeper and deeper and explore and find the truth and find uh, more clearer answers to already existing baffling problems, to already existing problems that do not have a solution. So in this regard, ethnographic research will be applicable. So in one sentence, ethnographic research is based on your direct first-hand observation of something. So let me share my slide. I won't say slide, my document, and take the discussions from there. And just like the last week, I have raised a lot of questions at the end. And if you think about these questions, if you reflect the questions, you will have a better idea of what is methods. Because last week you might have had an idea of what theoretical background is. Today you will have a clear idea of how you are going to apply methods for your study. So let me share my screen and start my discussion. Okay. So just as I defined earlier, ethnographic research is finding the truth in natural settings, and that too by direct observation. So these are the outcomes that I have set for the day. The first outcome is to help you to problematize ethnographic methods for data collection and analysis, with special emphasis on participant observation and field techniques. So this is one of my outcomes. And my second outcome is to help you to practically implement ethnographic research methods. And probably the second outcome is far more applied and far more logical, and I should say it's far more valid. So by the end of this talk, I would help you to apply the ethnographic research methods. So let's just move on. So this is the essence. For example, if you notice some kind of problem, because as I said, it all starts with problem. Let's see that you have a problem with people's behavior. You may read a lot about psychology on how to understand people's psyche, but sometimes you may have a direct observation when you talk to people, when you interview people, when you observe their mannerisms, when you think why they behave like that. For example, classroom management, classroom behavior. You may read a lot of text on classroom behavior written by a lot of Europeans on classroom management. You may have a lot of theoretical or pedagogical or epistemological grounding based on your readings. But sometimes what will be a great treasure is your first-hand observation, because it could extremely vary in your context. So that is one of the objectives. So the goal is for you to see people's behavior based on their perceptions, not based on what you read. Okay, not only based on your perceptions, my perceptions, but also your perceptions, your target audience perceptions. For example, let us say someone reads a culture studies. This happens in literature, culture studies. And in culture studies, let's say you study about indigenous cultures, or let us say you talk about tribal languages in linguistics, or you talk about tribal community. And when you do research, When you read a lot of information about those kind of communities, about how people read, that is not ethnography. Whereas if you directly go and meet people, know about their behavior pattern, know about their culture, know about their context, then it's ethnographic research. I hope my example gives you a clear perception of what first hand observation is, what discovering the truth by yourself is, what understanding it in your own way. So that is what happens in culture studies or tribal studies or classroom behavior or classroom management. Forget about what the literature says. It all boils down to you and the learner. Based on your perception, and your perception, you will rationalize your perception, perhaps by interviewing the tribal community, by going and conducting a survey with them, by asking them a questionnaire. So we'll be discussing about all these nuances today. What are the ways to do ethnographic research? What are the strategies? What are the data collection procedures? How to analyze those data? But it all boils down to understanding what ethnographic research is. So it's about picking information directly without others' perceptions. And I mean, it's true, isn't it? When we read a lot, sometimes we say that reading a lot helps us to expand our intellectual horizons, but sometimes it backfires. When you read a lot, you just go with a lot of preconceived notions. Sometimes just as little knowledge is dangerous. Similarly, having too much of knowledge about something also helps you to have a lot of preconceived notions. You kind of rationalize everything and you forget to see the larger picture. Is sometimes when you go with an empty cup, then perhaps you will have a greater grasp of things. So that is what ethnography tells you. So you go with an empty mind and just try to gather information. It's only between you and the learner you want to assess, and you are assessing based on direct methods. So researchers, you understand the phenomenon by communicating to others and by understanding others. And there is a whole science behind understanding others, which we will discuss now. So that's the particular reason I put this particular picture for ethnographic research, is that animals kind of don't have a lot of perceptions about the environment. They just react to the environment. They just look at the environment, they react. They don't have any preconceived notions, but they have a better grip of the environment. They can predict the environment about what's going to happen. Even if an earthquake is going to happen, they know everything. It's all because of the observations and not perceptions or clouding your mind with a lot of information. And this is one of the fundamental premises of ethnography. Let me re-emphasize what I said. The first premise, the most fundamental premise in ethnographic research is, don't cloud your mind with what others said. Go and find the truth yourself. Go and with your set of opinions, check out those opinions with certain measurable, scalable matrices, and then analyze your data. So the term ethnography in qualitative research comes from the Greek word ethnos. It means people, and graphing refers to writing. Observing people and writing your research outcomes. Observing an author and writing your research outcomes. Similarly, culture studies, as I said, tribal studies. I'll give you another example of ethnographic study. So let's say while there was a particular thesis that I read about ethnography some time back. It was about political strife in Sri Lanka, Jaffna. It's a political strife, and the political unrest or the political commotion or the political pandemonium and how people's lives were affected were written by the researcher. There was not much of literature review in the thesis, but most of what the researcher has documented in the thesis will definitely will stir up certain emotions in you, because she has beautifully portrayed on how people's lives were affected by real pictures, going to those places, interviewing especially women who are being raped, photographs, live interviews, the interview transcripts, and certain newspaper articles which actually reported something else, and how those articles can be debunked, and how there is bias in those articles. So these kind of research studies are called as ethnographic studies, and ethnographic study is very much possible in literature when you make tribal studies, or when you make culture studies, or when you study indigenous communities, or when you study linguistics, or when you do a study on the language of certain people, or when you do classroom management, when you do behavioral research. So in all these ways, ethnography is possible. But I have a very, very important point to make here. See, researchers, one important premise, one important aspect of any groundbreaking research is any groundbreaking researcher applies unexpected methodologies. See, you all expect literature research to be this way, to apply these benchmarks, to apply these designs. So experimental, quasi-experimental, observation, literature research. You don't require a methodology. You can use your theory and it is purely a theoretical research. But if an ELT researcher or an language teaching researcher, if they use ethnographic method, it is something which is entirely different. So they bring a lot of difference to the table. So these things are possible. For example, a person who is working on a particular author, though I have said this before, can go and do a live interview. Or if there are secondary researchers who have written about that particular author, to have interviews with those people. Okay, so this is called a first-hand observation, not reading author's psyche based on interpretations, but by primary sources and by direct interviews with the authors themselves. So this is called as first-hand knowledge, knowledge which is pure in crystallized form, not in an adulterated form. I mean, I'm purposefully using these words. Knowledge is adulterated when you look at knowledge through the other person's lens. Somebody said this because he is really he has carved a niche for himself. He is really a groundbreaking researcher. So I believe what he says. Why should I? Not necessarily. I can yet debunk his ideologies. Or just because he is the bestseller doesn't mean that I have to accept with what he says. So go with your first-hand experiences, and that is why you can have a mixed methods approach and club all the premises that we are discussing today. I hope you are pretty convinced that knowledge can really be approached in a very purest form based on your first-hand observation. I hope I'm making myself clear to you. Am I?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It's because sometimes I need that kind of reassurance, because it's a long talk, so I just need that just gives me the kind of reassurance and confidence that you are following me. So that's one important aspect of ethnographic research. So I want you to carefully digest the information, because I would like to reserve all my discussions at last, just to save time, because I have so much to cover in terms of ethnography. So probably by the last session, we would try to place our discussions in the ambit of your research. All right. The main purpose, let's move on to main purpose. The main purpose of ethnography is to observe a deeper understanding of people and their culture. For example, even understanding student psyche. To understand people and culture, literature. But if you can understand people's psychology is very much important to foster effective learning practices. So you need to know how to psychologically understand a student, maybe based on his interviews, based on a survey questionnaire, based on how your class was, based on what was wrong with the existing practices. So these all will come under ethnographic methods, right? But one distinguishing feature of ethnography is fieldwork. I mean, many universities have this. They give a break to the researcher to go and conduct real field work. Suppose you want to study a tribal culture, you are supposed to go to that particular community. Stay with the community. It could be in the deepest of woods. It could be that you may lose your communication with the outer world for a few months, but then that is how research should be. You should do your field work, total field work. Suppose you want to, interview a researcher, you will travel miles to just go and meet, set up an interview, and talk to him. So that is field work. So any research that has certain field work involved in it is really a groundbreaking work, which will help you to even do a lot of potential studies after your PhD is over. So any study is very, very useful and has great practical relevance if you can complete your PhD and start doing real research. All right, let me come back to the point. So this particular quote very much crystallizes the argument for the day. Bill Moyers. This very much crystallizes what ethnographic research is. Or perhaps this particular quote crystallizes what research is. Forget about ethnographic research. Creativity is piercing the mundane to find the marvelous, by Bill Moyers. What is mundane? Mundane is to take a particular topic and approach it how all the other researchers will apply it. So it's mundane. But if you take the same aspect and pierce that particular topic through a different aspect, then you can really unleash your creativity. So you have to pierce the mundane. And how can you pierce the mundane? You can pierce it only by applying the right methods. A method is a very, very important aspect for a researcher. To understand method is like understanding the nitty-gritties of the trade. Is understanding the tricks of the trade. So we haven't come to that yet. I will articulate those tricks very, very clearly in the later part of the lecture. So that's an exciting aspect of ethnographic research. So moving on from there. Okay, let's just go to the characteristics very quickly. Let me run through certain terms to put today's lecture in context. Your research design, your qualitative research design should have these characteristics. Not all, some of these characteristics. One, it should be contextual. Let me explain what contextual is, and let me ask you if your research is contextual after defining what contextual is. Two, qualitative research is unobtrusive. I mean, ethnography is a qualitative approach, so it's unobtrusive. Thirdly, any ethnographic research is longitudinal. And fourthly, it is collaborative. And penultimately, it's interpretive. Eventually, it's organic. Let me explain what each one of these terms are, and I want you to reflect on whether your research falls into these parameters. What is called contextual? Contextual refers to the research can be carried out in the context in which the subjects normally live and work, which means, for example, if you are doing a particular research on language teaching, do you have the exposure to the real classroom context? Then your research is contextual. For example, if you are doing a particular research on a particular language of a tribal community, will you really have access to that community? Is it possible for you to go to those places, visit the people there? In that case, your research is contextual. So ask yourself this question and tell me if it is contextual. Probably by the end of the day, you will justify to what extent maybe these ethnographic methods can be met with. Maybe at that time, you can bring these points to your discussion. Secondly, so I believe that most of what you do is contextual, because most of you who are doing ELT research are practicing teachers. And in fact, the candidate who is working on literature based research should also have some kind of context in which he is doing her research. Secondly, unobtrusive. What is the meaning of unobtrusive? You are not manipulating a phenomena. What do you mean manipulating? There is not, at this stage, there is not much of your interpretation here. Like, you are documenting the phenomena as it is. For example, when you meet certain people and talk to them to understand their psyche, or to understand the trauma, or when you talk about the loss of identity in people who suffer from displacement, or who have migrated, have you actually met those people? And is your observations based on first hand? Then you are not manipulating something. Your direct observation, you are unobtrusive. Thirdly, is your research longitudinal? What do you mean by longitudinal? It means you cannot arrive at conclusion based on observing 2 or 3 people, right? If you're doing a language studies, tribal people, tribal community, or if I am talking about political uh, unrest in Sri Lanka, I can't interview 2 or 3 people and write a whole thesis on the political strife in Sri Lanka. I'm just giving you an example. So this is called as longitudinal research. Means your research should be long. It should be based on number of observations, number of participants over span of years. Over span of years. Is not just you just go for a one day, do an interview, complete it and document it. Again, there is a procedure. We'll be discussing that. What are the procedures of ethnographic research? And when we talk about interviews, what are the procedures? What are the kinds? When we talk about surveys, what are the procedures? What are the kinds? Actually, I don't want to rush. In fact, if my lecture spills over to extra sessions, I am ready to handle, because altogether it's only 4 days, 4 into 2, 8 sessions. But frankly, I can't really do justice to 8 sessions. So I will just go in for a few extra sessions, if that's okay for you, or else I'll give you the material. I'll leave it to you. All right. So collaborative. So the fourth aspect is collaborative. So your research is not only individual, it actually does not depend on you, but you have other stakeholders also. For example, students or the stakeholders. For example, you may talk with the other professors in your industry. They may have a better understanding. You may talk with the head of your institutions when you talk about problems. So this is called as collaborative. In any research, even for ELT research, if you can collaborate with other researchers who are doing similar research to yours, if you can identify such people in communities like ResearchGate, academia, and Mendeley, and kind of interact with them, then it is a collaborative research. You ask them, you interview them, how they understand things, and that is pretty fine. And ethnographic research can also be interpretive after it meets up with these 4 parameters of contextuality, unobtrusiveness, a longitudinal framework, collaborative. And then you can move on to the interpretive analysis. You read the text, people said so and so, you have the interview recordings, you have the interview tapes, you just go listen to all the tapes, and ultimately now you have to interpret, right? Because when you are trying to even document your first hand observations, then it becomes a second hand observation. You get my point? See, suppose I observe something very carefully. I did this when I was doing my MPhil research on poetry, which was my first love. I did my research on imagery in the American poems with reference to Val Stephens. Now, I did some kind of ethnographic research because I used to go to American Consulate. I'm sure that many of you are familiar that on every poet they have the the old videos, the big cassettes, the kind of I'm so intrigued. Wait for the day to just take that 1 hour, put on the DVD, to reserve your place, and it still sends shivers through my spine, because the waiting time to take my particular CD I want about my author Val Stephens, put the DVD inside, they give you a separate TV, a sofa to sit and watch the person's life as recorded by the American contemporaries, and what those people thought about his poems. helped me to understand imagery better in the poems of Val Stevens. That's a kind of an ethnographic method where I watch the video clips. So I think if you are working on a particular author, today you needn't go to American Council. Perhaps you can go to a YouTube and you can watch the video. There's too much of information overload, but I'm sure that all of you will agree with me that it is not as intriguing as waiting for one particular video on the author for for days, reserving your seat, and watching that is altogether a different experience. It's such an intriguing experience. So the point I'm making is the first hand observation. So ultimately the point I'm making is, even in interpretive, I understand what others said, but when I write my observations, it becomes second hand, right? So a first hand observation of ethnographic research becomes second hand when you actually kind of interpret it, when you subject it to interpretive analysis. Your interview, you will transcribe your interviews, but you will bring in your views about that interview. So anyway, you are interpreting. So anything cannot be presented in its original form. Any communication, once it's delivered from A to B and from B to C, it becomes adulterated. I hope you agree with me. And if you think about these statements very deeply, then perhaps you will understand what I mean much, much better. So finally, it should be organic. What do you mean by organic? Purest form. That is, your interaction should be, your interpretation should be not based on a lot of your perceptions. Probably try to document it in plain and simple way directly and in alignment with the hypothesis. So that is organic. Organic, don't bring in your own permutations and combinations, which can happen in research. So to what extent can you apply these terms like contextuality, unobtrusiveness, longitudinal, collaborative, interpretive, and organic? Okay, so this is again the context of what ethnography is. And whenever we talk about qualitative approaches, you can apply all this, but ultimately you will be convinced after my entire series of lectures that there is no such thing as the best method. And if you have an understanding of all the methods, then that is the best method. Because I believe that knowledge is something which is eclectic and holistic, which is a combination of the best practices in the best fields. And that is what I mean by the earlier quote which I discussed about how to look at mundane from a different perspective. And that is what creativity is. All right, let's now move on to methods. Now when we talk about method, I just would like to focus on the last point here. Your data is gathered from a range of sources, which are direct observations or usually the conversations with the people who you intend to, the authors or so and so. Now this is the most important aspect. So how would you collect data? You now have a clear idea of what ethnographic research is. You now have a clear idea of what unadulterated thinking is. Now you have a clear idea on how not to go in with a lot of preconceived notions to present truth as it is. But in order to dissect truth, in order to look at truth with a clear lens, then you have to know what are the methods of data collection. Because every method will have a data collection method. So the first method of data collection in ethnographic research is the direct interviews. As I told you the other day, before some time, direct interviews with your authors, with your writers, even with secondary sources, with people who have come out with groundbreaking works related to your author. So try to set up interviews. This is an ethnographic method. Secondly, observations. What do you mean by observations? Going and directly observing the classroom. When you say that something is fundamentally wrong with the existing teaching approaches, it's a sweeping statement. If you say that there is something fundamentally wrong with the existing practices of teaching, people will look at these statements with a lot of scorn. They will challenge your opinions. But if you have a clear method of arriving at the truth. How did you find out that there is wrong with existing practices? Because you did a lot of classroom observations, perhaps, or you would have conducted a lot of survey with students, or you would have asked a lot of questionnaires, conducted some questionnaires and asked a lot of questions to the students, or you might have interviewed teachers, or you might have even conducted a questionnaire to ask them what are the existing problems that they encounter. So these are called as observations. One is interview, but to directly go and observe a classroom and find out what is the lacunae or the pitfall, or to assess the promises and pitfalls of every class, is what is called as direct observations. And then another method of data collection is through documents, looking at various documents. And most of the documents you should look for should be policy documents in your field. For example, people who work on culture studies should go and look at artifacts, should go and look at how people lived during those times, to see if you can collect some real data, some artifacts. What are artifacts? Artifacts are things. For example, people anthropological study, people go and probably dig out those places, find some statue, find the things that people used during those times, and have a method of doing a kind of a forensic analysis. I mean, the dating exactly how many years before did the civilization crop up. So those are called as artifacts. And next is a video, as I told you, watching video recordings of interviews of others, as it is there in YouTube. Or if you're working on American author, you have still those kind of, I don't know if it still exists, but I believe it does. You know, in American consulate, if you go, you have videos. And probably in British consulate, if you're working on a British author, then you have, you know, a lot of resources in British Council. And similarly, if you're working on Indian author or literature, you have a lot of information in Central Institute of Regional and Foreign Languages, Hyderabad, where they have domain specific departments: Department of Culture Studies, Department of Language Studies, Department of Literature, Department of Linguistics. They have separate branches. So there you will find a lot of resources. Again, if you are reading an Indian author like Arundhati Roy, you definitely have a lot of videos, a lot of interviews. Probably for a person today who is going to read on Dalit literature, can find a lot of exciting sources if you listen to the interviews of Arundhati Roy. Take her opinions through, directly from the horse mouth. Kind of do a kind of a transactional analysis or a discourse analysis of her talks. So video recordings, and then behavior analysis with your students, or in some cases even diary writing, a logbook entry. Or if you can work on a particular author, you can still find access to the person's diaries. But this is very rare, unless you are the first person to do a kind of an autobiography about somebody. You can't find a person's diary, nor or we are doing an autobiographical research. So these are some of the steps of data collection. I will stop here, and before I proceed, let me not stow thrones in the dark hoping to hit the bullseye. So I'll stop here believing that I have delivered the essence of my talk, and the second part of my lecture I'll continue to give myself a break and to kind of trigger your thinking process. Let me ask you to reflect on to what extent do you think these ethnographic practices will fit in the ambit of your research. Take a couple of minutes to reflect, and please present your views. We can take our discussion further from there. So you can take a few minutes, and that just gives me some kind of breathing time as well. So I would love to hear your views from everybody, but you can take your time to think about your context and just come back to the feedback. I'm really glad if at least a few of you can pull in your ideas and just tell me how it can fit into the context of your study. Do you feel that ethnography is a suitable approach, or do you believe that certain premises of ethnography or certain methods of ethnography can be used to collect your data? It's quite an unusually long period of lull.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Lion. Yeah. Thank you, Lion, for volunteering to express your opinions. Go ahead, Lion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, I feel that ethnographic research will definitely help me conduct my research because I like I want to understand how teaching happens in students. To understand about their writing skill, I think direct observation and while conducting interviews, I would be able to understand more about how their cognitive process is associated. So and while conducting interviews, one to one, face to face interviews will help me relate. Uh, it is really related to my study, like research.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said, Lion. Well said. I absolutely agree with you, and I think that was really a very deep observation on the application of the, principles that we dealt with. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Can I have any?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I was actually drawn to this very much to the this observation made by Bill Moyers. He says creativity is piercing the mundane in to find the marvelous.
Yeah.
And another point that I've really liked here is being unobtrusive. So very often what happens is we always deal with the target group, tend to, with our preconceived notions, or we have something, our goals in mind when we approach them, so that we want them to fall in line with what our goals and outcomes. But the truth is that, you need to, derive your entire research findings from what you actually observe, really, and not to manipulate things. Just see whatever exists. And I think that is, a very good eye opener for me, sir. So don't consider them, suppose I choose a group of students and I don't consider them as useless or they don't know much about things. But I think your entire research is going to be about these 20 or 30 students you are going to choose. So try to be open to observe what is happening with the students and try to observe the reality and then bring out your research findings from there.
True. Very well said, sir. Very well said. It's you have covered the entire aspects of the talk, and I believe that your approach to a particular study will be ethnographic. Though sometimes we don't clearly articulate whether it is ethnography. We can use these are just terminologies, but understanding the concepts and applying the concepts are far more important, and that's a deep observation. Your observation was a very deep observation. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir. And also, I just wanted to share with you, so even in our own college, in Noella College, there is something called the Ignatian Pedagogical Paradigm.
Okay.
They call it IPP, the kind of thing that was presented by Ignatius, who was the founder of the congregation. So he has spoken very much in this line, so observing students and being with them and accompanying them, which I think also I'd like to bring into my research, this part of it.
True.
Yeah.
Yes, apparently, even when I read about ethnography, it so much intrigued me, and I totally, agree that any kind of knowledge or all greatest discoveries that were made were all very original in thinking, and they were all first-hand observations, not people who went with a lot of preconceived opinions. So I really agree with what you said, and it is a beautiful spark that you spoke about Ignatius, the founder of the institution. So that was really very helpful in the context of today's discussion. Anybody else on how you can apply it in the context of? Yes, thank you. Any other observation on how you can just go and apply it in terms of culture in terms of just going and viewing people or interviewing people? Anybody had those kind of framework?
So my research is completely based on culture studies only. So
Yes.
ethnographic research, I am dealing with ethnoculture, subcultures and
Okay.
ethnoculture part. And I
Okay.
think I'll add on, but along with that, I will also add on about interviewing people of different cultures, sir.
Okay.
Definitely.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So I just believe, yeah, in that case, Benazir, I think your research very much fit into this ambit of ethnography, the principles of ethnography. Then
Yes,
perhaps you
sir.
should, yeah, then perhaps you should go and dig deeper into the finer aspects of ethnography, because these kind of lectures we are only scratching the surface to create that kind of spark in you where you go and read something which is very much pertaining to your study. So I think in that case, ethnography will be very much pertaining to your study. So you got to dig deeper into the subtle layers of ethnography. So, but thank you for that good observation.
Thank you, sir.
Any yes. So so we'll move on from there. If anybody has any other observations, okay. So let me continue from there. So we discussed about data collection steps in ethnography, and you may reflect on what kind of data you are going to collect, though it's too early for you. Maybe you don't know if you are going to do an interview or a direct observation, or look at artifacts, or just go and view some video recordings, do some behavior analysis. And the bottom line is, most of all, you'll be doing a blend of many methods and many approaches. So it will not be one approach per se. You'll be doing a blend of many things. So, okay, but there are some ethical concerns in any kind of research. Whenever you do ethnographic study, you should get the consent from the participants. That is called as informed consent. You should get consent. You should, when you set up an interview, you should tell them what the purpose of the interview is. You should tell them the data will be confidential. You should tell them that they will not leak, you will not leak the data. You tell them for what purpose you are going to use the data. And if you are, and especially only the scientific fraternity, if they are doing any kind of a groundbreaking drug test, then they have to make sure that an animal is not harmed. Similarly, when we are doing a behavioral test, when you are asking questions, the question should not psychologically affect the student, or you shouldn't exploit students for your research. These are some of the ethical concerns in ethnographic research. But the ethical considerations is a standalone paper for you, because again it is an explosive field with a lot of layers. In fact, you have one coursework exclusively devoted to ethics in research. So I'll purposefully not touch it, but ethical concerns is a very important aspect of ethnographic research. Okay, so let us just go to the structure of ethnography. In what do you do in ethnographic research? First of all, it just starts with any other kind of research, where you actually start by establishing your questions, and your questions will clearly state. When you tell me what is your question, I can tell you which research method will be applicable for you. Will it be quasi experimental, or experimental, or a qualitative study, or whatever, or a theoretical study, or a psychoanalytical study, or a multicultural study, or whatever. But these things can be very clearly predicted based on your questions. So your design will be based on your questions. As your lecture, as your research takes off, you can always come back to me and check out with the methodology if you have chosen the right method. So the method you choose is based on the questions that you set for your research. Okay. Second structure of ethnographic research is, you will very clearly decide what is the location of your research. When you talk about location, are you going to talk about a particular tribal community, or are you talking about any particular community like the Dalit community, or you're going to deal with any kind of immigrations in your study and talk about those psyche of people? And what is the context is about the, not only the location, about the lifestyle of the people there, which happens very much in culture studies. In culture studies, you got to write a preamble in your dissertation, the first chapter, you will give a preamble to the context of your work, how the author possesses the authors in terms of the location, in terms of their lifestyle, in terms of their context. I mean, these things happens in culture studies because character is reflected. The character, a deeper understanding of a character is reflected through the cultural manifestations that the author projects in his writing. And then thirdly, you should decide what are your data capturing methods, which we discussed earlier. And then how are you going to recruit participants? What do you mean by participant recruit? What is the sample size? Whether you are going to take 100 participants, whether you are going to take 50 participants, whether you are going to take one author, whether you are going to do a comparative analysis, or if you are going to do on a tribal community, how many people you are going to interview. Is it going to be 10 people? One people is not, one or two persons is not authentic. These are called as participant samples. Again, there is a parameter. In ELT research, a sample size of 100 is considered to be ideal in intervention research, because these questions do often crop up. What is the ideal sample size for ethnographic research? Well, it depends. When you are doing a tribal study, if you can do 10 interviews on the particular tribal community, that is wonderful data. But when you are doing an intervention research with only 10 students, then the data is insufficient, right? So it varies whether you are doing your research in literature or language teaching. It depends, it varies, participants. And then what are your materials? Your materials could be 3 or 4 works of the author, or your materials in terms of ELT research could be a particular framework. It could be the materials you design to teach. It could be technology. It could be the mode of delivery. It could be the text that you have designed. It could be the tasks that you designed. It could be the activities. Call it whatever. But in science, materials are defined as, you take this chemical CO2, mix it with H1. See, the exact chemicals, the compositions, the permutations, if you mix it, this is the reaction. You can say that. Materials in the scientific context is used in that way. But in the language teaching context, it is about your the test materials, the modules, the teaching lesson plans that you have. It is about how you moved from step A to step B. What did you actually do in the classroom? And in literature research, how many works of the author did you go through? These are the materials. Coding refers to how you interpret. How did you interpret? And then reporting. Then reporting is your writing. And after you do all that, in ethnographic research, you will come out with some recommendations. You will come out with some suggestions. And again, this is one of the beautiful premises of ethnographic research. Ethnographic research helps you to take the field one step further. It helps you to take the field one step further. So you come out with some viable, feasible, practical solutions. So you'll come out with some recommendations to the existing problems, some suggestions, and that is called as, ethnographic research. And to recap, I have just given you a recap of what ethnographic research is in the form of mind map, which you may read a little later. But moving on, I have raised a number of questions here to help you to deeply reflect what methods are, how to apply methods, and then let me move on to survey research. But today, today I'll stop with ethno because I believe that it is always good to stop with one particular design. So let's stop with one heart today. Let's not have a longer session because I think then it will not serve its purpose. As I said, it's okay if it spills over. Although I was given 9 hours, if it spills over, if it's pretty okay for you, I am ready, because alternative days, whenever I am free, I am ready to squeeze in time and discuss like this. I have a lot to discuss. But if you feel that it's enough, then I can just share the resources with you. So I think with this we can stop. I hope that today I've helped you. I set 2 goals at the beginning of my talk. The first goal is to help you to problematize what ethnographic research is, to give you a bird's eye view of what ethnographic research is. And my second objective for the day is to help you to practically apply it in the context of your study. And I'm pretty happy that some of you showed me live samples, examples of how you can apply it in the context of your research. So thank you very much. I hope that you find the ethnographic design very intriguing and appealing. Let's stop with this for the day. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Any questions? Or let's wind up. Okay, if you don't have any questions, shall we close the session?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right. Yes, yes. Thank you very much. So yeah, before that, I just want to ask you, when can we have our next session? Because I don't know your availability.
Weekend is yes, sir.
Okay,
Saturday,
well, you
Sunday,
tell.
Saturday,
Okay.
Sunday is okay with me. I don't have any issues attending.
Oh, okay. Others' perspective, Benazir, what's your
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Saturday, Sunday
What?
would be fine.
fine? All right. Okay. Do you want me to schedule only during this time, or any time would be ideal? Chalsa, what's your opinion?
Yes, sir. I think we can keep Sundays free actually.
Okay. Oh,
because
yeah.
I might have programs around Sundays.
Okay.
And
All right.
other days I'm fine with other days, sir.
Other days. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sharanya, ma'am, what's your?
Yeah, as Charles has said, like Sunday we'll have service at so
I
Saturday
understand.
is fine, sir.
I
Saturday is
understand.
fine, and any time is okay, sir. Yeah.
Oh, okay. 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 I understand.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. Suguna, ma'am, any reservations about any?
No
specific-
issue for me, sir. When you do give the link, I'll be attending it, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am.
I'll inform you. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
sure. So shall we have our next session on Saturday, perhaps at 10 o'clock? Saturday, tomorrow is Saturday, isn't it?
That's tomorrow, sir. Yes.
Tomorrow. All right, all right. Okay, tomorrow I'm not available. I'm just going. Okay, shall we schedule it on Monday then? Monday evening at the same time,
Fine, sir.
7
Fine,
o'clock.
sir. Yes.
Is it okay for all of you Monday evening?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
All
sir.
right, all right,
All
all right. Okay, okay. I'll meet you on Monday. Thank you for attending. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
sir.
sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.